Welcome back, dear ones. We're going to continue with our canvas here by putting some adornment around it to make it look like an altarpiece, to really call forth that texture, that adornment that we think of when we see an altarpiece. And for that, I have some special ribbon or lace, anything like ribbon, lace, rickrack, something that looks special and has texture. Here's some other examples. The color actually doesn't matter because it'll be covered up with paint by the end. So while mine is gold, it doesn't have to be. It can be white or any color at all. And this is the one that I've chosen. It's not too wide and not too thin, sort of a medium width. And I'm going to place it up against my canvas here to imagine kind of how it might work going around the edge of it. If you're working with a rectangular canvas, you can either follow the rectangle or you can create an arch in the rectangle and really make it go around any way you please. Just kind of imagining. And anytime we come back to our canvas, we're going to reconnect to it. We're going to reconnect to our prayer, remembering that intention that we wrote on the canvas, really remembering that prayer, touching it again, bringing our hands to it. You can even bring one hand to your heart, connecting your heart to the canvas, and just remembering that prayer that you made as we did our initial entry into the doorway, where we imagine the mystical mother will reveal herself to us. And of the other products that I have here, I have my modeling paste or molding paste, and I also have a palette knife. If you don't have a palette knife, that's fine. You can use a spatula or an old credit card, just something to apply the molding paste with. And it's the molding paste that will be what our lace will be glued onto the canvas with. And the idea of this adornment that we're making is to really make the altarpiece something special, to give it that little extra touch of bejewelment, of texture, to give the mystical mother really a frame, a context through which to come of something special. So it's really a way of refining our prayer to her. And as I begin to apply the molding paste, just using my spatula, dipping into the molding paste, and I'm just going to apply it right around the edge where this lace will actually go, or this ribbon, whatever it is, the material that you've chosen. So I'm just lightly applying, but a pretty thick layer so that it's pretty pasty and that the lace will really have something to stick into. We don't want it to be lifting up as we proceed with our painting process. We want it to really be very firmly applied. And so I'm going to go all the way around, all the areas, all the edges. And again, if you're working with a rectangle, you can choose to follow the rectangular shape or to create an arch shape inside the upper edge of your rectangular canvas. And you can actually have more options for different shapes to make within it. So I have a pretty thick layer of molding paste all around. If I've gone over the edge, I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. So I've got it all. It's almost like decorating a cake. It's a pretty thick layer, like as if it were icing on a cake. And as you begin to work with acrylic products, if you haven't done so before, you'll want to be really mindful of the fact that they dry fairly quickly, especially if you're working in a warm climate, a hot climate. And when acrylic products dry, they turn into plastic fairly quickly. So you're going to want to have a jar of water always on hand and maybe a rag so that you can stick the palette knife or any brushes that you're using as quickly as possible into the jar of water. or in the case of the palette knife, wipe that acrylic paint off with a rag. So here in my curve, I'm going to make a little cut now that I see how much length I needed, and then I'm just going to do another cut across here. So if you're working on a rectangle, you can do the same procedure of measuring and cutting on each corner. So you can see that was pretty easy. And I'm just going to go all the way back around and make sure that my lace is really pressed in, is solidly embedded in the molding paste all the way around. Make sure that things are even, because when this dries, it's going to be pretty permanent. And so I see that I don't really need my palette knife anymore, except I'm going to come along and just kind of clean up where I had a little bit of excess. And kind of press in, put any excess back into the jar. And you might notice that there's some little other texture that the knife itself leaves, and that's fine. You can play with that, and sometimes it gives a neat effect, kind of like that icing on the cake effect. But just to smooth out any areas, putting excess back into the jar. And again, this is an opportunity to double check if any areas didn't get pasted in all the way, to just make sure that everything's firmly where it needs to be. Come along the edge and clean up any excess. And clean off my knife with a rag so that I don't have that modeling paste drying like plastic on the palette knife. I'm going to make sure I close the jar also so that my product doesn't dry out. And I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. And once it's dry, I can come back in and with a gloss medium, which I'll show you in just a little bit when this is dry. With a gloss medium, I'll come in and just really seal it and make sure that the lace is completely sealed in. Once your molding paste has dried completely, you can come in with this product, gloss medium, polymer medium gloss. Different brands call it different things, but it's basically an acrylic varnish. And with it, you're going to come back over your lace, your ribbon that you applied using the molding paste. And you're basically going to use this gloss medium, this varnish, as a sealant to really bind the ribbon and the lace completely in onto the canvas. So with a medium-sized brush, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, you're just going to come over all the areas where you had applied the lace, and you'll probably be working flat. You might not be working vertically on an easel like I am, which will make it somewhat easier. You don't have to worry so much about drips. And you can really take the bristles of your brush and work the varnish into all the little areas in between here. If you have sort of an open ribbon lace like I do, just working the varnish gently into all of these areas, making sure that it's all completely sealed up. And as you do this, as you make these movements, you make these brush strokes with the varnish, you can really use it to your advantage, this physical act, of imagining that you're sealing in your prayer to the mystical mother. That every single time that the bristles touch the lace and you make these little movements, that these movements are very intentional, and that with them you're sealing in the prayers that you've made to the mystical mother. And in this way you'll work your way all the way around the canvas, all the way around this developing altarpiece, making prayers, and making prayers, inviting the Divine Mother to come to you, to reveal herself to you in whatever form. You can almost imagine her beginning to take shape in this area within the frame. As you very carefully and very mindfully and very intentionally, with all of your love, make these ceiling brush strokes. And so you will proceed. Thank you so much.